Welcome to my SOL review video on two-step equations. So just a quick review of our steps to solving a two-step equation. We want to isolate the term that contains the variable. And then after we isolate the term that contains the variable, then we isolate the variable. And the golden rule of algebra is what we do to one side of the equation, we must do to the other. So remember, when we're solving equations, we need to keep it balanced. So let's look at some examples. So number 1 says 1/3 x minus 7 equals 15. Remember our strategy, if it's addition or subtraction, we're going to circle our variable and draw our t. Okay, so we're going to isolate the term that contains a variable, so we're going to get rid of this minus 7. The opposite of subtracting 7 is adding 7, and we're going to do it to both sides. Now we have negative 7 plus 7, so those are going to cancel out and equal 0. Bring down your 1/3 x. Bring down your equal sign, and 15 plus 7 is 22. Now, when we have a fraction in front of the variable, we look at this as division. So the opposite of division is multiplication. So look at the denominator. The denominator is 3, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3. And essentially, we're using the inverse property because the inverse of 1/3 is 3 over 1. So we're multiplying both sides by 3. So the 3's cancel. We're left with 1x, so we'll call it a 1 in disguise. And 22 times 3 is 66. Now, the good thing about equations is that you can check them. So to check this, I would type into my calculator 1 divided by 3 times my answer, which is 66, and then I would hit minus 7 and hit equals. And my calculator says 15, so I know my answer of 66 is correct. Okay, let's move on to example number 2. So once again, if it's addition or subtraction, circle your variable and draw your t. Now, I circled the plus sign here because if there's a plus or minus sign in front of the variable, I need to circle it because that tells me if it's positive or negative. Now I want to cancel out 8. So would I add 8 or subtract 8? Good. I would subtract 8 from both sides. So the 8's are going to cancel. Bring down your 4x and bring down your equal sign. And negative 36 minus 8 is negative 44. Now I'm not done because I don't have the variable by itself. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by the number in front of the x, which is 4. 4 divided by 4 is a 1 in disguise. So cancel those out. Bring down your x and bring down your equal sign. And negative 44 divided by 4 is negative 11. Now let's double check to make sure it's correct. So I would type in to my calculator 8 plus 4 times negative 11 and hit equals. And the calculator says negative 36, so I know my answer is correct. Okay, turn it over to the back side. And let's look at some more examples. So addition or subtraction. So circle your variable and draw your t. So we want to get the 2x by itself, so we're going to get rid of plus 1/2. So the opposite of adding 1/2 would be subtracting 1/2. And when I'm subtracting 1/2 from negative 5, I'm actually subtracting 0.5 because that's the decimal for 1/2. So 1/2 minus 1/2 is 0, so cross those out. Bring down your 2x. And -5 minus 1/2 or minus 0.5 would be negative 5.5 or 5 5/10. I don't have the variable by itself, so the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is a 1 in disguise. So cross those out. They cancel. Bring down your x. And negative 5.5 divided by 2 is negative 2 7/75. Now to check that, I would type it in. So number in front of letter means multiply. So I would type in 2 times 2.75 negative plus 1 divided by 2 or plus 0.5. And then I would hit equals, and of course I get -5. So it does in fact check. Okay, let's look at number 4. So circle your variable, draw your t, and since I see a plus sign in front of the variable, I'm going to circle it. So that tells me that the 2/3 is positive. So draw your t. Now I want to cancel out 5 negatives. I'm not looking at this, I'm looking at right here. I want to cancel out 5 negatives, so I need to add 5 positives. Because if I subtract 5 from both sides, the -5 would not cancel. So I have to add +5. Now those equal 0. Bring down your 2/3 x. And 17 plus 5 is 22. Now there's another way to do this, but I'm going to show you one way because a lot of people don't remember the other way. So the opposite of division is multiplication. Okay, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3 because the opposite of dividing by 3 would be multiplying by 3. And let me show you what happens here. The 3's cancel, just like they did in the previous example we did on the other page, number 1. But this time there's a 2 still left over. So I've got to bring down 2x. Equals 22 times 3 is 66. So when I multiply both sides by 3, I only canceled out the 3's, not the 2. So now the opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is a 1 in disguise. So x equals 66 divided by 2, which is 33. Now the other way I mentioned of doing this, you could make this into one step if you multiplied both sides by the reciprocal of 2/3. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. So I could have multiplied both sides by 3/2, but this splits it up a little bit easier and makes it so you're not multiplying by a fraction of 3/2. So some people like this method a little bit easier, a little bit better, I should say. All right, now let's double check. So in our calculator, we would type in 5 negative plus 2 divided by 3 times 33 and hit equals. And of course, we get 17. So my answer of 33 does in fact check. Okay, we've got 2 more examples, 5 and 6, and these are special cases. So we have to do something a little bit different with these 2. So number 5, okay, whenever we have 2 terms on top of a fraction, we have a special case here. So we're going to circle the top. And that means I'm not going to add or subtract from both sides first. I actually have to get rid of this denominator. So the opposite of dividing by -3 would be multiplying by -3. So we're going to multiply both sides by -3. The -3's are going to cancel, and I'm going to bring down what I circled. 15 plus n equals 6 times -3, which is -18. Now I can circle my variable, and I'm going to circle the plus sign since it's in front of the variable. And I'm going to draw my t. Now I want to cancel out 15, so I'm just looking at the 15. Would I add 15 or subtract 15? Good. I want to subtract 15 because I want this to equal 0. And 15 minus 15 is 0. So cross it out, bring down your n. And negative 18 minus 15, remember you're going further into the negative, so it's negative 33. Now you have to be real careful when you check this type of problem. So you want to do order of operations on top first. So when I type in the top, I have to hit equals. So I would type in 15 plus 33 negative, hit equals, then I would divide by 3 negative and hit equals again, and I would get positive 6. That's the only way it's going to check if I have to hit equals after I do the top. Otherwise, you'll never get it to check. Okay, number 6. 7 minus 1x equals negative 13. Now, when I circle my variable and draw my t this time, I notice I circled a minus sign and I circled an x. And there's no number in front of the x. So when I circle that, I have to put a 1 there. And I only need to do this when there's a minus sign in front of the x, because if there's positive 1x, that doesn't change it, because I divide by positive 1, it doesn't change its value. But if I divide by negative 1, it does change its value. So I need to make sure I put a 1 there. And now I'm going to cancel out the 7. So how do I cancel out positive 7? Would I add 7 or subtract 7? Good. I have to subtract 7 from both sides. 7 minus 7 is 0. Now bring down the negative 1x. Because there is a minus sign in front of it, it makes that variable negative. And negative 13 minus 7 is negative 20, because if you take away 7 from negative 13, you're going further into the negative. Now the opposite of multiplication is division. I have to get rid of that negative because I can't have a negative in front of the variable. So divide both sides by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is a 1 in disguise, so cancel it out. Bring down your x, and negative 20 divided by negative 1 is positive 20. Now to check this, you just type it into the original. So I would type in 7 minus 20. I don't need to put the 1 that I put in there. And 7 minus 20 is negative 13, so it does in fact check. So when you are solving these, a couple things to remember. Make sure what you do to one side, you do to the other. And make sure when you are canceling out a number, make sure that number actually cancels out, because you want it to equal 0. And also be sure that once you get your answer, that you plug it back into your calculator to make sure it does in fact check. So that concludes our SOL review video on two-step equations. I hope you have a great day.